The conference room fell silent when Diana Hartwell interrupted our quarterly review meeting, pointing directly at me with a smile that looked like victory. "You report to me now," she announced, her voice carrying across the table, filled with my colleagues. I watched as several people shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes while others stared down at their notebooks. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice soft when I responded with simple agreement: no pushback, no protest. The confusion that flickered across her face told me she expected a fight. When the meeting ended, I walked past her new desk and left a single file there. No note attached, no words spoken, just paper waiting silently. She never noticed it until HR arrived asking if she had reviewed the contents yet. My name is Kathleen, and 5 years ago I walked into Morrison Creative Solutions as a junior marketing analyst, clutching my portfolio and hoping to make a good impression on my first day at this mid-sized advertising agency in Denver. The building sat on 17th Street, surrounded by coffee shops and startup offices, with floor-to-ceiling windows that filled our workspace with natural light. I never imagined that within those 5 years, I would climb from entry-level analysis to senior marketing strategist, managing a team of 8 talented specialists who trusted my judgment and valued my leadership. Margaret Santos had been my mentor from day one, a woman in her late 50s who understood the advertising industry better than anyone I'd ever met. She guided me through complex client relationships, taught me how to read market trends, and most importantly, showed me how to lead with integrity rather than intimidation. When Margaret announced her retirement 6 months ago, she pulled me aside privately and told me she had recommended me as her replacement to the board of directors. The promotion would be announced after the quarterly review, giving me time to prepare for the transition. My team consisted of remarkable individuals who had become more than just colleagues over the years. Tyler Brooks, our data analyst, could spot patterns in consumer behavior that others missed entirely. His quiet brilliance helped us win 3 major accounts last year alone. Jessica Walsh brought creative fire to every campaign, transforming dry statistics into compelling narratives that resonated with target audiences. Amanda Chen coordinated our projects with precision, keeping everyone organized while maintaining the positive energy that made our department feel like family. We occupied the northwest corner of the 3rd floor, where I'd earned my own office with a view of the Rocky Mountains. My walls displayed awards from successful campaigns, photos from team celebrations, and a whiteboard covered in strategic planning notes. This space represented years of hard work, late nights, and the satisfaction of building something meaningful with people I respected. Then Diana Hartwell appeared. She arrived on a Tuesday morning, walking through our department with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Tall and professionally dressed, she carried herself like authority incarnate, introducing herself as Margaret's replacement with documentation that appeared official and complete. Her resume listed impressive credentials from marketing agencies in Chicago and Atlanta, along with MBA credentials from prestigious universities. Everything looked legitimate on the surface. But something felt wrong from the moment she started speaking. During her introduction to the team, Diana mentioned strategies that didn't align with our industry standards. She referenced campaigns that sounded familiar but contained details that didn't quite match reality. When Tyler asked about her experience with data visualization software, her answers remained vague and theoretical rather than practical. Jessica's questions about creative processes received responses that felt rehearsed rather than authentic. Most concerning was how Diana immediately began restructuring our workflow without understanding our current projects. She reassigned client accounts that had taken months to develop, moving high-profile relationships to different team members without consulting anyone about existing dynamics. The Brennan Industries account, which I'd cultivated for 3 years, suddenly became her direct responsibility. The Peterson Group campaign that Jessica had been developing got handed to an external consultant Diana claimed to know. By the end of her first week, Diana had moved into Margaret's former office and begun scheduling meetings without including me. She instituted new reporting procedures that required all team communications to go through her approval first. Project deadlines shifted according to her preferences rather than client needs or strategic timing. The collaborative atmosphere we'd built started dissolving under her authoritarian approach. My colleagues expressed confusion during private conversations in the break room and parking garage. Tyler mentioned that Diana's technical knowledge seemed superficial when they discussed analytics platforms. Jessica worried about creative direction changes that didn't serve our clients' best interests. Amanda struggled with new administrative requirements that seemed designed to create bottlenecks rather than improve efficiency. Something didn't add up, so I decided to investigate. Working late one evening when the office was nearly empty, I accessed the server backup system that Tyler had shown me months earlier during a routine maintenance check. Corporate emails were automatically archived, including messages that users believed they'd deleted permanently. As I scrolled through recent communications between Margaret and upper management, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Diana had been intercepting emails between Margaret and the executive team, somehow gaining access to confidential correspondence about succession planning. Worse than that, she'd been forging responses that made it appear as though Margaret had changed her recommendations. The deleted emails I found in the backup showed Margaret's actual messages, all strongly supporting my promotion and expressing complete confidence in my abilities to lead the department. The forged emails painted a different picture entirely. They suggested that Margaret had concerns about my readiness for leadership, questioned my client relationship skills, and recommended bringing in an external candidate with more experience. Diana's name appeared in these fabricated messages as Margaret's preferred choice, complete with glowing endorsements that Margaret had never written. As I dug deeper into the email trails, I found evidence that Diana had been systematically deleting the authentic messages while replacing them with her forgeries. She'd managed to convince upper management that Margaret's change of heart was legitimate, creating a false narrative that supported her own appointment while undermining my credibility. The scope of her deception was staggering. Diana had gained access to our internal systems weeks before her official start date, studying our organizational structure and client relationships. She'd researched Margaret's communication style well enough to create convincing fake emails. Most disturbing of all, she'd identified me as the primary obstacle to her scheme and developed a strategy to eliminate my influence before I could challenge her authority. Sitting alone in my office at nearly midnight, surrounded by printed evidence of Diana's fraud, I realized I was dealing with someone far more dangerous than a typical workplace manipulator. This was sophisticated criminal activity that threatened not only my career, but the stability of our entire department. Diana had orchestrated an elaborate con game, and she'd played it perfectly until this moment. The question now was what to do with this information, and whether anyone would believe me when Diana had already established herself as the legitimate authority figure while positioning me as a disgruntled employee who'd been passed over for promotion. Diana wasted no time consolidating her stolen power, and her next moves revealed the true scope of her ambitions. Within days of discovering her email forgeries, I watched helplessly as she began systematically taking credit for campaigns I'd spent years developing. The Hartwell Electronics launch that had won our agency the Colorado Marketing Excellence Award suddenly became her signature achievement in presentations to senior management. My strategic analysis of millennial consumer trends got repackaged as her innovative research during board meetings I wasn't invited to attend. The corner office that had been promised to me as part of Margaret's succession plan became Diana's domain overnight. She redecorated with expensive furniture and artwork that somehow appeared within her first week, transforming the space into something that looked more like a corporate showroom than a working office. Meanwhile, I found myself relocated to a cramped cubicle near the copy machine where the constant noise and foot traffic made concentration nearly impossible. My new workspace felt like a deliberate insult positioned where everyone could see my reduced status. The cubicle walls barely reached shoulder height, offering no privacy for phone calls or confidential work. The fluorescent light overhead flickered intermittently, casting uneven shadows across my computer screen. Every time someone walked past to use the copy machine or water cooler, I was reminded of how far I'd fallen in the organizational hierarchy. Diana began excluding me from client meetings, claiming that fresh perspectives required direct communication between herself and our accounts. The Brennan Industries team, who'd worked exclusively with me for 3 years, received notice that all future interactions would go through Diana personally. When Mr. Brennan called asking why I'd been removed from their account, Diana intercepted the call and explained that I'd requested reassignment due to being overwhelmed with other responsibilities. She scheduled strategy sessions during times when I had standing commitments, then criticized my absence as evidence of poor prioritization skills. Project reviews that had always included my input suddenly happened behind closed doors, with decisions presented as final conclusions rather than collaborative discussions. My team members started receiving conflicting instructions with Diana's directives, often contradicting strategies we'd developed together over months of careful planning. The psychological warfare escalated when Diana began documenting everything as performance issues. She created incident reports claiming I'd missed deadlines that had never existed, failed to communicate information I'd never received, and demonstrated unprofessional behavior during meetings I hadn't been invited to attend. These fabricated reports went directly to HR, building a paper trail that painted me as incompetent and insubordinate. During team meetings I was allowed to attend, Diana would interrupt my presentations with corrections that weren't accurate, question my data analysis using flawed assumptions, and suggest that my recommendations showed poor understanding of current market conditions. She did this with a smile, maintaining a tone of helpful guidance while systematically undermining my credibility in front of colleagues who'd trusted my expertise for years. The isolation became more complete as Diana spread rumors about my competence throughout the office. She mentioned to various department heads that I seemed overwhelmed by my responsibilities and might benefit from reduced duties. During elevator conversations, she expressed concern about my ability to handle client relationships, suggesting that my previous successes might have been team efforts rather than individual achievements. These carefully planted seeds of doubt grew into whispered speculation about whether I'd ever been as capable as people believed. My team members found themselves caught in an impossible situation. Tyler confided that Diana had questioned his loyalty, asking whether he felt comfortable continuing to work with someone whose performance had declined so noticeably. Jessica received hints that her own advancement might depend on distancing herself from my influence. Amanda was told that her association with my supposed failures could impact her annual review. The stress began affecting my sleep, my appetite, and my confidence. I started second-guessing decisions that would have been automatic just weeks before. Simple tasks felt overwhelming when every action might be twisted into evidence of incompetence. The office environment that had felt like a second home became a minefield where any misstep could be weaponized against me. But Diana's confidence led her to overreach, and that's when I discovered the true extent of her criminal enterprise. My friendship with Jake Morrison in IT security proved crucial when I mentioned strange computer behavior during casual conversation. Jake had noticed unusual network activity during off hours and agreed to investigate quietly. What he found shocked both of us. Diana had installed unauthorized surveillance software on company devices, including hidden recording applications that captured private conversations between team members. The spyware was sophisticated, designed to avoid detection by standard security scans. It recorded audio from computer microphones, captured screenshots at regular intervals, and logged keystrokes to monitor private communications. Diana was gathering intelligence on every employee, building profiles of personal relationships, professional concerns, and potential vulnerabilities she could exploit. Even more disturbing was the discovery that Diana had been accessing confidential client databases after hours, copying proprietary information that companies had trusted us to protect. Marketing strategies worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in development costs were being systematically stolen. Consumer research data that gave our clients competitive advantages was being extracted and transferred to external servers. Jake's deeper investigation revealed that Diana had created shell companies designed to receive this stolen information. She'd established fake business entities with names like Strategic Marketing Insights and Consumer Trend Analytics, complete with professional websites and contact information that looked legitimate. These companies were selling our clients' confidential data to their direct competitors, turning our agency into an unwitting source for corporate espionage. The financial records Jake accessed showed payments totaling over $200,000 flowing into accounts controlled by Diana's shell companies. She wasn't just stealing a job or seeking workplace authority. She was operating a sophisticated data theft operation that threatened the foundation of our clients' businesses and could destroy our agency's reputation permanently. Client presentations that Diana had been attending weren't opportunities for her to learn our business practices. They were intelligence-gathering missions where she identified the most valuable proprietary information. Strategic plans, consumer databases, marketing algorithms, and competitive analysis reports were all being systematically copied and sold to the highest bidders. The scope of the betrayal left me feeling sick. Companies like Brennan Industries and Peterson Group had trusted us with their most sensitive business information. They'd shared future product plans, budget allocations, and strategic initiatives under confidentiality agreements that Diana was violating for personal profit. The damage extended far beyond our agency to encompass dozens of businesses whose competitive advantages were being sold to their rivals. As I processed this information in Jake's security office surrounded by monitors displaying evidence of Diana's crimes, I realized that my personal situation was just the surface of something much larger and more dangerous. Diana hadn't targeted our company randomly. She'd researched Margaret's retirement timeline, studied our client relationships, and identified our agency as an ideal target for her criminal enterprise. The carefully crafted persona of a qualified marketing executive was merely camouflage for a sophisticated criminal operation. Diana's credentials were probably as fake as her emails. Her previous experience was likely similar schemes at other agencies. The professional references and university degrees were all part of an elaborate false identity designed to gain access to valuable corporate information. But Diana had made one crucial mistake. In her confidence that she'd eliminated me as a threat, she'd overlooked the possibility that I might discover her surveillance system and data theft operation. She'd been so focused on consolidating power and destroying my credibility that she'd underestimated my ability to investigate her background and uncover the truth. Now I had evidence of crimes far more serious than forged emails and workplace harassment. Diana was committing federal offenses that could result in years in prison. The question was how to expose her without becoming her next victim, especially when she'd already positioned me as a disgruntled employee whose accusations might be dismissed as desperate attempts to reclaim lost status. The answer would require careful planning and perfect timing because Diana was clearly prepared to destroy anyone who threatened her operation. But now I knew what I was really fighting against, and that knowledge gave me the motivation I needed to develop a strategy that could bring her down. My investigation into Diana's background revealed a pattern of destruction that extended far beyond our agency, painting a picture of someone who had perfected the art of corporate infiltration over many years. Working from my apartment during evenings and weekends, I used professional networking sites and public records to trace her employment history, discovering a trail of companies that had suffered mysterious data breaches shortly after her departure. The timeline was chilling. 3 years ago, Atlanta-based Meridian Marketing experienced a major client exodus when confidential strategies began appearing in competitors' campaigns just months after Diana's stint as a consultant. 2 years before that, Chicago's premier advertising lost several major accounts when proprietary research data surfaced in rivals' presentations. Each incident followed the same pattern. Diana would join the company with impressive credentials, gain access to sensitive information, then disappear just before the damage became apparent. LinkedIn connections led me to former colleagues who were willing to share their experiences privately. Sarah Mitchell from Meridian described Diana as initially charming and competent, but noticed inconsistencies in her claimed experience. When Sarah tried to verify Diana's previous work, the references either couldn't be reached or provided vague endorsements that didn't match the detailed achievements on her resume. Marcus Thompson from Premier Advertising remembered how Diana had pushed for expanded access to client files, claiming she needed comprehensive information to develop integrated strategies. Within weeks of gaining that access, their biggest client received an anonymous package containing Premier's complete strategic plan for the following year, along with detailed consumer research that had cost them 6 figures to develop. The pattern extended to financial fraud as well. Through courthouse record searches, I discovered that Diana had been investigated for embezzlement at a marketing firm in Phoenix, though charges were dropped when the company chose to settle privately rather than pursue prosecution. The incident involved missing funds from client accounts and forged approval signatures, but Diana had already moved to her next target before the investigation concluded. Her real name appeared to be Diana Walsh, not Diana Hartwell as she'd introduced herself. The false identity included fabricated university transcripts from schools that had no record of her attendance and professional certifications from organizations that confirmed they'd never issued credentials under her name. The sophistication of these forgeries suggested either extensive experience in document fraud or connections to a professional counterfeiting operation. More disturbing was the discovery that Diana was currently wanted for questioning in Oregon regarding a similar scheme at a Portland advertising agency. The warrant had been issued 3 months ago, just before her appearance at our company. She wasn't just running a single con game, she was fleeing from the consequences of previous operations while launching new ones. The data theft operation I'd uncovered was far more extensive than Jake and I had initially realized. Using advanced forensic software, Jake traced the stolen information to servers located in 3 different states, with digital fingerprints suggesting coordination with organized criminal networks. The shell companies Diana had created were connected to a larger operation that targeted marketing agencies, specifically extracting valuable intellectual property and selling it through sophisticated laundering schemes. Client databases weren't the only targets. Diana had accessed our agency's financial records, employee personal information, and strategic planning documents. She knew our profit margins, salary structures, and growth projections. This information could be used to manipulate future business relationships or provide competitors with insights into our operational vulnerabilities. The scope of personal data theft was equally concerning. Diana had copied employee social security numbers, home addresses, and banking information used for direct deposit. She'd accessed performance reviews, medical insurance records, and background check results. This treasure trove of personal information could be used for identity theft, financial fraud, or blackmail against anyone who threatened her operation. As I compiled this evidence in my apartment, creating detailed timelines and cross-referencing public records, I realized that Diana represented a sophisticated criminal enterprise rather than an opportunistic individual. Her methods were too polished, her documentation too professional, and her technical capabilities too advanced for someone operating alone. She was likely part of a network that specialized in corporate infiltration and intellectual property theft. The realization that I was dealing with organized crime rather than workplace fraud changed everything. Diana wouldn't simply disappear if exposed. She might retaliate in ways that could endanger my safety or that of my colleagues. The stakes were higher than my career or even our agency's survival. We were dealing with people who had resources, experience, and connections that could make fighting back extremely dangerous. But just as I was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of Diana's criminal operation, I discovered something that gave me hope. Federal law enforcement was already investigating similar schemes targeting marketing agencies across multiple states. The FBI's Economic Crime Unit had established a task force specifically focused on intellectual property theft networks, and Diana's operation matched the profile they were tracking. Through a contact at the Denver District Attorney's Office, I learned that investigators had been waiting for someone with inside access to provide evidence that could break open the case. Previous victims had either been too intimidated to come forward or discovered the theft too late to preserve crucial digital evidence. My position gave me the opportunity to document Diana's crimes in real time while maintaining access to the evidence she couldn't destroy without exposing herself. However, my investigation had also triggered Diana's security protocols in ways I hadn't anticipated. The next morning, she confronted me with a smile that carried unmistakable threat. "Kathleen, I've noticed some concerning patterns in your work lately. Late hours, unusual computer access, questions about company procedures that seem outside your current responsibilities. I hope you're not developing any unhealthy obsessions with matters that don't concern you." Her message was clear. She knew I was investigating her, and she was prepared to escalate beyond professional retaliation. That afternoon, I received a call from HR requesting a meeting to discuss performance issues and workplace behavior concerns that Diana had documented. She'd submitted reports claiming I'd been accessing files without authorization, making inappropriate inquiries about confidential matters, and displaying signs of instability under pressure. The trap was closing, and Diana's next move would be to have me terminated, while portraying my accusations as the desperate fabrications of a disgruntled employee facing dismissal for cause. She'd done this before, using her position of authority to discredit whistleblowers while positioning herself as the reasonable manager dealing with a problematic subordinate. But Diana had made a crucial error in her confidence. By accelerating her timeline and moving against me directly, she was creating the very evidence I needed to expose her operation. The falsified performance reports, the retaliatory behavior, and the attempts to frame me for her own crimes would all become part of the case against her when properly documented and presented. The challenge now was to complete my evidence gathering before Diana could destroy the proof of her crimes or eliminate me as a threat. She'd shown her hand too early, revealing that she knew about my investigation while underestimating my preparation for this exact scenario. The file I would leave on her desk was already being compiled, containing evidence that would trigger federal intervention before she could complete her escape plan. Diana thought she was closing in for the kill, but she was actually walking into a carefully prepared trap that would expose her entire operation and bring down the criminal network she represented. The question was whether I could execute my plan before she realized how thoroughly I documented her crimes and how many law enforcement agencies were waiting for the evidence I was about to provide. Rather than panic when Diana accelerated her attacks against me, I decided to use her overconfidence as the weapon that would ultimately destroy her. The meeting with HR was scheduled for 9 in the morning, giving me less than 18 hours to complete the most comprehensive documentation of corporate crime I'd ever assembled. Instead of preparing a defense against her false accusations, I focused on building an ironclad case that would shift the entire conversation from my supposed performance issues to her federal crimes. Working through the night in my apartment, I organized the evidence into categories that would be immediately comprehensible to investigators, executives, and prosecutors. Diana's email forgeries went into one section, complete with metadata showing when the authentic messages had been deleted and replaced. Her surveillance operation occupied another folder with detailed technical analysis provided by Jake showing exactly which devices had been compromised and what information had been captured. The financial crimes section was the most damaging, containing bank records for her shell companies, payment receipts from data buyers, and transaction histories showing the flow of stolen intellectual property into competitor organizations. I'd managed to identify 4 major companies that had purchased our clients' confidential strategies with communication records, proving they knew the information was stolen when they made their payments. But the personal angle required more delicate handling. I began reaching out to Diana's former victims, not just the colleagues who'd shared their concerns privately, but the executives and managers who'd been blamed for the security breaches she'd orchestrated. These conversations were difficult because many people were still dealing with the professional and financial consequences of Diana's crimes, but they were willing to provide statements when they learned she was continuing her operations elsewhere. Marcus Thompson from Premier Advertising was particularly helpful because he'd maintained copies of the investigation files from Diana's time there. His company's private security firm had identified the same technical signatures that Jake was finding in our systems, proving that Diana was using consistent methods across multiple targets. Marcus had been waiting for an opportunity to provide this evidence to law enforcement, but needed confirmation that Diana was still active before coming forward. Sarah Mitchell connected me with the FBI agent who'd investigated the Meridian marketing breach, Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez, from the Economic Crime Unit. Agent Rodriguez explained that Diana was part of a larger investigation called Operation Clean Sweep, targeting organized networks that specialized in corporate intelligence theft. They'd been tracking Diana's activities for over a year, but needed inside evidence to build a prosecution case that would hold up in court. The conversation with Agent Rodriguez revealed the true scope of what I'd uncovered. Diana wasn't just stealing from our agency. She was part of a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had infiltrated dozens of companies across multiple industries. Marketing agencies were particularly valuable targets because they held confidential information for numerous clients, creating opportunities for massive data theft operations. Agent Rodriguez confirmed that Diana Walsh had arrest warrants in 3 states and was connected to an international network that sold stolen corporate intelligence to overseas buyers. The shell companies I'd discovered were just the American side of an operation that extended to Europe and Asia, where intellectual property laws made prosecution more difficult and profits more substantial. My evidence was exactly what federal investigators needed to coordinate simultaneous arrests that would prevent Diana from fleeing to another jurisdiction. Agent Rodriguez explained that they'd been waiting for someone with real-time access to Diana's current operation, someone who could provide evidence that was fresh enough to prevent destruction and detailed enough to support serious criminal charges. The technical documentation Jake had prepared was particularly valuable because it showed Diana's surveillance methods in detail, allowing investigators to search for similar intrusions at other companies she'd targeted. The financial records I'd compiled would enable asset seizure that could provide restitution for her victims while cutting off funding for the larger criminal network. But Agent Rodriguez also warned me that Diana's operation included people who wouldn't hesitate to use intimidation or violence to protect their interests. The decision to move forward with providing evidence meant accepting that I was potentially putting myself at risk until arrests could be made. She assured me that federal protection would be available if needed, but emphasized that the next 24 hours would be critical for everyone's safety. As I prepared the final version of my evidence file, I realized that Diana had made several crucial mistakes that would make her conviction inevitable. Her confidence in her forged credentials had led her to put everything in writing, creating digital trails that could be followed even if she destroyed the original files. Her need to control every aspect of the operation had prevented her from building in the security measures that might have protected her from discovery. Most importantly, Diana had underestimated the intelligence and dedication of the people she was trying to manipulate. She'd assumed that stealing my promotion and isolating me professionally would eliminate any threat I might pose. Instead, those attacks had motivated me to investigate her background more thoroughly than she'd anticipated, leading to discoveries that would bring down her entire network. The surveillance system she'd installed to monitor potential threats had actually created evidence of her own crimes. Every conversation she'd recorded, every document she'd accessed, and every attempt to manipulate company information had been logged in ways that could be traced back to her activities. Her own spyware would become the evidence that proved her guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Tyler's technical expertise had been invaluable in documenting Diana's methods with the precision that federal prosecutors would need. His analysis showed not just what information had been stolen, but exactly how it had been extracted, where it had been sent, and how it had been monetized. This level of detail would make it impossible for Diana to claim ignorance or frame her activities as legitimate business research. The human cost of Diana's crimes was also becoming clear as I spoke with more of her former victims. Employees who'd been blamed for security breaches had lost jobs and professional reputations. Companies had failed when competitors gained access to their strategic plans. Clients had suffered financial losses when their confidential information was sold to rivals. The ripple effects of Diana's operations had destroyed careers and businesses while enriching criminal networks. But Diana's biggest mistake was moving against me before securing her escape route. If she'd simply continued her data theft operation for another few months before disappearing, she might have avoided detection entirely. Instead, her need to neutralize what she perceived as a threat had exposed her to the very investigation that would destroy her. As dawn approached and I put the finishing touches on my evidence compilation, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation that bordered on euphoria. The file I would leave on Diana's desk would contain enough evidence to trigger immediate federal intervention while protecting our agency and clients from further damage. Diana's operation was about to collapse under the weight of its own criminal ambition, and justice would finally be served for all the victims she'd created over the years. The irony wasn't lost on me that Diana's attempt to frame me as a disgruntled employee would actually provide the perfect cover for delivering evidence that would destroy her. While she was focused on my supposed performance issues, federal agents would be reviewing documentation that would put her in prison for decades and dismantle the criminal network she'd helped build. In a few hours, I would walk into that HR meeting not as a victim of workplace harassment, but as a federal witness whose evidence was about to change everything for Diana and her criminal associates. The quiet confidence I'd maintained throughout her attacks would finally be justified when the true scope of her crimes was revealed to everyone who'd believed her lies. The file I left on Diana's desk that morning contained 147 pages of evidence that would transform her from predator to prey in the span of a single conversation. I'd spent the early morning hours creating a summary sheet that would immediately grab HR's attention, followed by sections organized for maximum impact and legal clarity. The document was designed to be compelling to investigators while remaining accessible to executives who needed to understand the scope of the threat to our company. The opening page contained Diana's real name, her criminal aliases, and a list of outstanding warrants from 3 different states. Attached mugshots from her previous arrests provided visual confirmation that the woman claiming to be our department head was actually a wanted criminal. Her fabricated credentials were displayed side by side with verification attempts that showed no legitimate university or professional organization had any record of her claimed achievements. The second section documented her email forgery operation with technical precision. Metadata analysis showed exactly when authentic messages from Margaret had been deleted and replaced with fabricated versions supporting Diana's false appointment. Side-by-side comparisons revealed subtle differences in writing style that linguistic analysis could confirm weren't written by the same person. Digital fingerprints proved the forged messages had been created on Diana's personal devices rather than company systems. Financial records occupied the most damning section of the file. Bank statements for her shell companies showed payments totaling over $400,000 from organizations that had purchased our clients' stolen data. Wire transfer receipts provided clear proof of money laundering operations that violated federal banking laws. Tax records revealed unreported income that would trigger IRS investigation in addition to criminal charges. The surveillance evidence Jake had compiled created an irrefutable case for invasion of privacy violations and illegal wiretapping. Screenshots showed the unauthorized software installed on company devices, with logs detailing what conversations had been recorded and which files had been accessed without authorization. Employee privacy had been violated on a massive scale, creating potential liability for both Diana and any organization that employed her. But perhaps the most powerful section contained victim statements from Diana's previous operations. Former colleagues described identical patterns of credential fraud, data theft, and employee manipulation. Companies provided documentation of financial losses suffered when their confidential strategies appeared in competitors' campaigns. The testimonies painted a picture of systematic criminal activity spanning multiple years and causing millions of dollars in damages. I'd also included a detailed analysis of the ongoing threat Diana posed to our current clients. Her access to strategic plans, consumer research, and competitive intelligence represented an immediate danger to businesses that trusted our agency with their most sensitive information. The longer she remained in position, the greater the potential for financial and reputational damage that could destroy relationships built over decades. The technical appendix contained Jake's complete forensic analysis with detailed explanations of how Diana's spyware operated and what information it had captured. Network logs showed unauthorized access to client databases, financial systems, and employee records. The sophistication of her surveillance operation suggested professional training or assistance from organized criminal networks. Agent Rodriguez had reviewed a preliminary version of the file and confirmed that it contained sufficient evidence for immediate federal intervention. Arrest warrants were being prepared, while seizure orders would freeze Diana's assets and shut down her shell companies. The coordination with state and local law enforcement would ensure she couldn't escape to another jurisdiction before prosecution began. When HR Director Patricia Monroe arrived at Diana's office that morning, she carried the authority of someone who'd already been briefed on the situation by federal investigators. Patricia had worked in corporate security before joining our agency, giving her the expertise to understand immediately what she was reviewing. Her background included handling previous cases involving employee fraud and criminal infiltration, though never anything approaching the scope of Diana's operation. The conversation that followed was swift and decisive. Patricia called Diana into the conference room where I'd experienced my first humiliation just weeks earlier. But this time, the power dynamics were completely reversed. Diana entered expecting to discuss my termination, and instead found herself confronting evidence of her own criminal activities spread across the table like an indictment. Patricia's questions were precise and devastating. She asked Diana to explain the discrepancies in her credentials, the unauthorized software found on company systems, and the financial transactions that traced back to her shell companies. Each inquiry was supported by documentation that made denial impossible and explanations inadequate. Diana's response revealed the calculated nature of her criminal persona. Rather than express shock or confusion, she immediately shifted into damage control mode, suggesting that the evidence had been fabricated by a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. She claimed that I'd created false documents and planted digital evidence to frame her for crimes she hadn't committed. But Patricia had expected this defense and was prepared with technical analysis that proved the evidence's authenticity. Metadata from deleted emails showed creation dates that preceded my investigation by months. Financial records had been obtained from banks and government agencies that couldn't have been influenced by any employee manipulation. The surveillance software had been discovered by IT security during routine maintenance, not through any investigation I'd conducted. More damaging to Diana's credibility were the victim statements from her previous employers. Patricia had contacted these companies directly, confirming that the testimonies were genuine and the patterns described matched exactly what was happening at our agency. The probability that multiple organizations would fabricate identical stories to support my supposed frame-up was mathematically impossible. As Diana realized her carefully constructed defenses were crumbling, she made the mistake that would seal her fate permanently. In desperation, she attempted to destroy evidence by remotely accessing our computer systems to delete files she thought only she could control. But Jake had anticipated this move and prepared countermeasures that would turn her destruction attempts into additional evidence of obstruction of justice. The moment Diana activated her remote access tools, security systems triggered automatic backups that preserved everything while creating logs of her deletion attempts. Instead of eliminating evidence, she was generating new proof of her criminal activities in real time. Every file she tried to destroy was automatically copied to secure servers that federal investigators could access immediately. But the most shocking development came when federal agents arrived at our office building while Diana was still attempting her evidence destruction. Agent Rodriguez and her team had been monitoring Diana's digital activities, waiting for exactly this type of desperate move that would provide grounds for immediate arrest. Diana's attempt to destroy evidence had triggered coordinated law enforcement action across multiple jurisdictions. As agents entered our conference room with arrest warrants, Diana's composed facade finally cracked. The professional confidence she'd maintained throughout her infiltration operation gave way to the desperation of a cornered criminal who realized her elaborate con game was over. Her protests about being framed became increasingly frantic as handcuffs were applied and her rights were read. The arrest triggered immediate security protocols that protected our agency from further damage. Diana's access to all systems was terminated instantly, her office was sealed as a crime scene, and forensic specialists began collecting evidence that would support federal prosecution. Client companies were notified of the security breach, while assurances were provided that their confidential information would be protected throughout the investigation. But the most satisfying moment came when Diana finally understood how completely her operation had been exposed. As agents prepared to transport her for processing, she looked directly at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief that someone she'd dismissed as a powerless victim had orchestrated her downfall. The quiet confidence I'd maintained during her attacks had masked a level of strategic thinking she'd never anticipated or respected. The investigation that followed revealed the true scope of Diana's criminal enterprise and her connections to organized networks operating internationally. My evidence had provided the breakthrough that federal investigators needed to dismantle operations spanning multiple countries and industries. Diana's arrest was just the beginning of prosecutions that would continue for years, as the full extent of her network was uncovered and eliminated. Diana's arrest triggered a federal investigation that revealed criminal operations far more extensive than anyone at our agency could have imagined, transforming our quiet advertising office into the center of an international law enforcement operation. Within hours of her handcuffs being applied, FBI forensic specialists had established a command center in our conference room with computer equipment and evidence processing stations that looked more like a crime laboratory than a corporate workspace. Special Agent Rodriguez explained that Diana's real name was actually Diana Walsh Brennan, and she was a key figure in a criminal organization called the Meridian Syndicate that specialized in corporate infiltration and intellectual property theft across multiple industries. The network operated like a sophisticated business with specialists who handled different aspects of identity theft, document forgery, surveillance technology, and money laundering through international shell companies. The scope of the organization was staggering. Over the past 5 years, the Meridian Syndicate had infiltrated 47 companies across 12 states, stealing intellectual property worth an estimated $23 million. Marketing agencies were particularly valuable targets because they held confidential information for multiple clients, creating opportunities for massive data theft operations that could be monetized quickly through competitor sales. Diana's specific role was as a cleaner, someone who specialized in eliminating evidence and neutralizing internal threats to ongoing operations. Her attacks against me hadn't been personal retaliation. They were professional techniques designed to discredit potential whistleblowers before they could expose the syndicate's activities. She'd perfected these methods through similar operations at dozens of other companies. The surveillance equipment discovered in our office was far more sophisticated than Jake had initially realized. Federal analysis revealed that Diana had installed hardware modifications in our server room that enabled remote access to all company systems, including supposedly secure client databases and financial records. The syndicate had been monitoring our operations in real time, identifying the most valuable information and planning extraction strategies for maximum profit. But the investigation also revealed that Diana had made critical errors that exposed the entire network to federal prosecution. Her confidence in her forged credentials had led her to create digital trails that could be traced back to the syndicate's central operations. Her need to control every aspect of the infiltration had prevented her from implementing security measures that might have protected her associates from discovery. Most damaging was Diana's decision to accelerate her timeline when she perceived me as a threat. This deviation from standard syndicate protocols had exposed her to the investigation that would ultimately bring down the entire organization. If she'd simply continued her data extraction for another few months before disappearing, the network might have remained hidden for years. The asset seizure that followed Diana's arrest revealed the financial scope of her criminal enterprise. Federal agents froze accounts containing over $3 million in stolen data proceeds, along with real estate vehicles and luxury items purchased through money laundering operations. The syndicate had been operating as a highly profitable criminal business, with Diana earning more than most corporate executives through her theft and fraud activities. International cooperation enabled simultaneous arrests of Diana's associates in Canada, the United Kingdom, and Germany. The network had been selling American intellectual property to overseas buyers who used it to compete against the original developers in international markets. Corporate secrets stolen from companies like ours were being used to undermine American businesses in global competition. The personal cost of Diana's crimes became clear as federal investigators contacted her victims across multiple companies and industries. Employees who'd been blamed for security breaches had lost careers and professional reputations. Executives had been terminated when their companies suffered mysterious competitive losses. Small businesses had failed when their strategic advantages were sold to larger rivals. Our agency's clients were understandably concerned about the security of their confidential information, but Agent Rodriguez was able to provide assurances that the investigation had identified exactly what data had been compromised and where it had been sent. Recovery operations were already underway to retrieve stolen information from buyer organizations and prevent its further distribution. The cooperation between our team and federal investigators created an unexpectedly positive outcome for agency morale and client relationships. Rather than viewing us as security risks, clients appreciated our transparency about the breach and our cooperation with law enforcement. Several companies increased their business with us specifically because they trusted our commitment to protecting their interests. Tyler's technical expertise proved invaluable to federal investigators who needed to understand exactly how Diana's surveillance systems operated. His analysis helped them identify similar intrusions at other companies and develop countermeasures that would prevent future infiltrations. Tyler received recognition from the FBI for his contributions to cybersecurity, opening career opportunities in federal law enforcement. Jessica's creative skills were essential in helping clients understand how their stolen strategies might be misused by competitors. She developed presentations that explained the risks without causing panic, while providing recommendations for protecting intellectual property in the future. Her work impressed several client companies who offered her consulting opportunities that significantly advanced her career. Amanda's organizational abilities became crucial in managing the complex coordination between our agency, federal investigators, and affected client companies. Her attention to detail ensured that evidence was properly preserved while business operations continued with minimal disruption. The experience led to her promotion to operations manager with responsibilities far beyond her previous role. But perhaps the most significant development was Margaret's revelation about her retirement timing and Diana's infiltration. During a confidential meeting with federal investigators, Margaret explained that she'd suspected Diana's credentials were fabricated and had been working with law enforcement to monitor her activities while gathering evidence for prosecution. Margaret's retirement hadn't been entirely voluntary. She'd agreed to step aside temporarily to create the opportunity for Diana to expose herself through her criminal activities. The succession plan that had seemed to elevate Diana while marginalizing me was actually an elaborate trap designed to document her crimes while protecting agency assets and client information. The investigation had been months in development, with Margaret serving as a confidential informant while maintaining her normal responsibilities. She'd recommended me for promotion, not just because of my qualifications, but because federal investigators needed someone with integrity and intelligence to help document Diana's activities from the inside. Margaret's decision to trust me with this responsibility, even without revealing the full scope of the operation, demonstrated her confidence in my character and abilities. She'd known that my natural tendency to investigate problems thoroughly would lead to discoveries that federal agents needed for prosecution, while my ethical standards would ensure that evidence was gathered legally and preserved properly. The revelation that I'd been unknowingly participating in a federal investigation added new dimensions to Diana's defeat. Her attempts to frame me as an incompetent employee had actually provided cover for gathering evidence that would destroy her entire criminal network. Every attack she'd launched against me had created additional documentation of her illegal activities. As federal agents prepared to transport Diana to a detention facility pending trial, she made one final attempt to negotiate by offering information about her associates in exchange for reduced charges. But Agent Rodriguez explained that the evidence I'd provided was so comprehensive that cooperation wasn't necessary for prosecution. Diana's value as an informant had been eliminated by the thoroughness of my investigation. The irony of Diana's situation wasn't lost on any of us. Someone who'd built a career on exploiting other people's trust and destroying their livelihoods was now facing decades in federal prison because she'd underestimated the determination of a single person she'd tried to eliminate. Her sophisticated criminal operation had been brought down by the basic investigative skills and ethical commitment she'd dismissed as insignificant threats. The investigation would continue for months as federal agents traced connections to other criminal networks and recovered stolen assets for victim compensation. But Diana's part in the operation was finished, along with her ability to harm innocent people through fraud and manipulation. Justice was finally being served for all the victims she'd created over years of criminal activity. The transformation of our agency following Diana's arrest and the dismantling of the Meridian Syndicate created opportunities for growth and success that exceeded anything we'd experienced before the crisis began. Within 2 weeks of her removal, I was officially appointed as department head with unanimous support from the board of directors, who expressed admiration for my integrity and investigative abilities during the most challenging situation in the company's history. My first priority was rebuilding team morale and restoring the collaborative atmosphere that had made our department successful before Diana's infiltration. We held a series of meetings where everyone could express their concerns and share their experiences, creating an environment of openness that helped heal the psychological damage caused by months of manipulation and surveillance. The relief in people's voices was palpable as they realized they could finally speak freely without fear of retaliation or monitoring. The new security protocols we implemented became industry standards for protecting against similar infiltration attempts. Working with federal cybersecurity experts, we developed comprehensive background verification procedures that would prevent credential fraud like Diana's. Our surveillance detection systems became so sophisticated that other agencies began requesting consulting services to improve their own security measures. Client relationships strengthened significantly as companies appreciated our transparency during the investigation and our commitment to protecting their interests above our own. The Brennan Industries account, which Diana had tried to steal, became one of our most profitable relationships when Mr. Brennan expressed gratitude for our dedication to security and ethical business practices. Peterson Group expanded their partnership with us specifically because they trusted our integrity after witnessing how we'd handled the crisis. 3 months after Diana's arrest, our agency received the Colorado Business Ethics Award for our cooperation with federal investigators and our commitment to protecting client confidentiality during a major security breach. The recognition brought new business opportunities as companies sought partners who prioritized ethical behavior over short-term profits. Our revenue increased by 37% within 6 months, largely due to clients who valued our proven integrity. Tyler's expertise in cybersecurity led to his promotion as our Chief Technology Officer, with responsibilities for protecting not just our agency, but our clients' digital assets as well. His analysis of Diana's surveillance methods became the foundation for security training programs that other businesses adopted to protect themselves from similar threats. The FBI offered him a permanent position with their cybersecurity division, but he chose to stay with our agency, where he could continue developing innovative protection systems. Jessica's work during the crisis earned her recognition as one of Denver's most promising marketing professionals, leading to speaking opportunities at industry conferences and consulting contracts with major corporations. Her ability to maintain creative excellence while dealing with the stress and uncertainty of federal investigations demonstrated resilience that impressed clients and competitors alike. She now heads our creative division with a team of 12 specialists working on national campaigns. Amanda's organizational skills during the federal investigation led to her appointment as operations director, overseeing all administrative functions across multiple departments. Her attention to detail and ability to manage complex situations under pressure made her invaluable in coordinating between law enforcement clients and internal teams. Her career advancement from assistant coordinator to senior management happened faster than anyone anticipated. Margaret returned from her abbreviated retirement to serve as senior advisor, sharing her expertise while enjoying a reduced schedule that allowed for personal time she'd earned through decades of service. Her decision to work with federal investigators while maintaining normal business operations protected our agency from the devastating damage that Diana's criminal network had inflicted on other companies. Her strategic thinking and courage saved dozens of jobs and millions of dollars in client relationships. The legal proceedings against Diana and her associates continued for over a year, with trials that resulted in sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years in federal prison for various members of the Meridian syndicate. Diana herself received a 22-year sentence for her role in the conspiracy, along with orders to pay restitution to victims across multiple states. The criminal network was completely dismantled, with assets distributed to compensate businesses and individuals who'd suffered losses. The impact extended beyond our immediate situation, as federal investigators used our case as a model for identifying and prosecuting similar criminal operations. The techniques we'd developed for gathering evidence and documenting fraud became training materials for law enforcement agencies dealing with corporate infiltration. Our experience helped protect other businesses from becoming victims of organized crime networks. But the most significant change was personal, as I discovered leadership abilities I'd never fully recognized before facing Diana's challenges. The experience taught me that true authority comes from competence, integrity, and commitment to protecting others, rather than from titles or positions on organizational charts. Leading people through crisis revealed strengths I could apply to any future challenges our business might encounter. The crisis also deepened relationships with colleagues who'd supported me during the investigation and demonstrated loyalty when it would have been easier to distance themselves from someone Diana was trying to discredit. Tyler, Jessica, and Amanda became more than professional associates. They became trusted friends whose judgment I valued and whose success I was committed to supporting. The shared experience of overcoming criminal manipulation created bonds that would strengthen our team for years to come. My office now occupies the corner space that Diana had stolen, but the decorating reflects collaboration and transparency rather than authority and control. The walls display awards from successful campaigns, alongside photos from team celebrations and certificates recognizing our agency's ethical standards. The space represents earned respect rather than stolen power, creating an environment where people feel welcome rather than intimidated. The most meaningful recognition came from clients who expressed gratitude for protecting their confidential information at considerable personal and professional risk. When other agencies might have prioritized internal politics over customer security, we'd chosen to fight criminal infiltration regardless of the cost to individual careers or company reputation. That commitment to doing what was right rather than what was easy became the foundation for long-term business relationships. Reflecting on the entire experience, I realized that Diana's attempted destruction of my career actually accelerated my professional development by forcing me to discover capabilities I might never have developed under normal circumstances. Her attacks revealed strength, determination, and investigative skills that proved invaluable not just in defeating her criminal operation but in leading our agency to unprecedented success afterward. The story became a reminder that people who gain power through deception and intimidation are ultimately vulnerable to those who build influence through competence and integrity. Diana's sophisticated criminal operation was defeated not by superior technology or overwhelming resources, but by basic human qualities like curiosity, persistence, and commitment to truth. Her downfall proved that authentic leadership will always triumph over fraudulent authority when given sufficient time and opportunity. Most importantly, the experience reinforced my belief that protecting others is more important than protecting yourself, and that standing up for what's right will ultimately be rewarded even when the immediate consequences seem devastating. Diana's victims across multiple companies had suffered because no one was willing to risk confronting her criminal activities. Our willingness to fight back despite the apparent odds against success prevented her from creating additional victims while bringing justice for those she'd already harmed. As I conclude this story, I want to ask you a question that connects to the experience we've shared. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone was using authority or position to treat you unfairly, and you had to decide whether to fight back or accept the injustice? How did you handle that challenge, and what did you learn about yourself in the process? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, because these experiences shape who we become as people and professionals. Thank you for listening to this story about standing up for what's right, even when it seems impossible to win. I hope it reminds you that integrity and determination can overcome even the most sophisticated deception, and that protecting others is always worth the risk to yourself. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves or others. Your support helps these stories reach people who can benefit from knowing they're not alone in facing difficult situations, and that justice is possible when good people refuse to give up.